Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of this statement, although I must say I couldn't believe my ears, listening to the Home Secretary's statement as if this was their plan all along, when we all know it is another U-turn. After months of pressure, the Prime Minister has finally accepted our calls for a full statutory national inquiry into the grooming gangs. And I welcome that we have finally reached this point. And we must remember that this is not a victory for politicians, especially the ones like the Home Secretary who had to be dragged to this position, or the Prime Minister. This is a victory for the survivors who have been calling for this for years. I have been speaking to many who do not have confidence that a government that ignored their concerns will deliver. But before I turn to the detail of the Home Secretary's statement, I want to recognise the tireless work of those who refuse to let this issue be buried. Survivors like Fiona Goddard, who bravely waived her anonymity, and the parents of survivors like Marlon West, who I spoke to this morning, Maggie Oliver, whose courage in speaking truth to power has been instrumental in bringing us to this point. The late Andrew Norfolk, whose fearless journalism brought these crimes to light, Baroness Casey for her review, and Charlie Peters, who has consistently been a voice for the voiceless. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's handling of this scandal is an extraordinary failure of leadership. His judgment has once again been found wanting. Since he became Prime Minister, he and the Home Secretary dismissed calls for an inquiry because they did not want to cause a stir. They accused those of us demanding justice for the victims of this scandal as, and I quote, jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Yes. A claim the Prime Minister's official spokesman restated this weekend. Shameful. It has been left to Conservatives time and time again to force this issue. 3 times, Mr. Speaker. 3 times. They can mutter now. They all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry. They voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote at all, asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, they voted against. At committee stage of the crime and policing...
Mr. Swallow, I want to set a good example. It's a very serious debate. Temps are running high, but I certainly don't want you to see you pointing and shouting and bawling in that way. Okay, Ben.
Mr. Speaker, they can point and shout as much as they like. They know the truth as we on the side of the House do. Yes. 3 times, I will repeat myself, Mr. Speaker, 3 times. Labour MPs voted against a reason amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, they voted against. At committee stage of the Crime and Policing Bill, they voted against a national inquiry. And at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister repeatedly ruled out a national inquiry to the chairs of all of these Labour MPs who are now pretending this is what they believed all along. And no doubt, the Home Secretary, in her response to me, will try and claim that the previous government did nothing. Yes, yes. A wholly false assertion that she should not repeat today. The Conservative government took extensive action, starting with the original J report, commissioned in 2014 by the then Home Secretary Theresa May. A year later, she commissioned the independent investigation into child sexual abuse, and Sajid Javid commissioned ethnicity data collection in 2018. So it is wrong, as the Home Secretary said, to claim that ethnicity data collection had not been done, and I will remind her that the Foreign Secretary criticised Sajid Javid at the time, said he was bringing the Office of Home Secretary into disrepute, and said he was pandering to the far right for doing exactly what she says she's doing now. They should be ashamed of themselves. We accepted all the recommendations of that previous child sexual inquiry of 2022, except the one to have a new cabinet minister, which would not have made any difference at all to the victims of this scandal. The Home Secretary claimed that the recommendations sat on the shelf. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. We went further than those recommendations. It was the Conservatives who established the Grooming Gangs Task Force, which supported police forces to make 807 arrests for group-based child sexual exploitation last year. So don't tell me we did nothing. It is vital, Mr. Speaker, that this inquiry is robust, swift, and above all, independent. There are legitimate concerns about institutions investigating themselves. especially as some of the most egregious cases of institutional failure occurred in Labour-controlled authorities. They can moan as much as they like, Mr. Speaker, but the people out there believe that is why nothing has happened yet. In Greater Manchester, Operation Augusta was prematurely shut down. In Rotherham, under continuous Labour control since 1974, we saw repeated failures. In Telford, where Labour has predominantly held power, the current MP initially rejected calls for an inquiry while serving as council leader. This inquiry must have teeth. It must start with known hotspots like Bradford and Rochdale, and I commend my honourable friend, the member for Keighley, for his persistent advocacy of this issue. We need clear commitments, Mr. Speaker. For example, will the inquiry examine the role of ethnicity in these crimes, confronting hard truths about potential cover-ups motivated by fears of appearing racist? There's no point then muttering. The Home Secretary said it herself. I spoke to the father of a survivor just this morning, and he told me the survivors need to have someone who is independent that they can go to and trust. It is no use them being forced to speak to the same authorities who ignored them in the first place. So will this inquiry ensure that no one, whether police officers, councillors or council officials, is beyond scrutiny? The government's approach to the Casey review itself raises serious concerns. While the review's findings are crucial, we as legislators are sent here to make decisions, not to outsource the difficult ones. The Prime Minister has waited months for someone to take this decision for him. This is the kind of dithering and delay that the survivors complained about. Mr. Speaker, we need answers to the following questions. The House deserves to know what changed the Prime Minister's mind from thinking this was dog whistle far-right politics to something he must do. When exactly did Baroness Casey submit her findings to Downing Street, and did the government request any changes to her report? Does she agree that anyone in authority who deliberately covered up these disgusting crimes should be prosecuted for misconduct in public office, and those prosecutions should happen alongside, not after, the inquiry? Because we believe that anyone in the police, local authorities, social services, or even the CPS who covered this up because they cared more about so-called community relations than about protecting vulnerable girls as young as 10 years old should be pursued. And we welcome her comments about perpetrators not being able to make asylum claims. I will remind the Home Secretary that we put forward an amendment in the Borders Bill, and she and all her colleagues voted against that very measure. So does she now agree that perpetrators should also not be able to make human rights claims to avoid deportation, and will she legislate to do that? Will the inquiry be concluded within 2 years, and will every one of the 50 towns affected be covered, including Bradford, which is still refusing to conduct an inquiry into this? And will those local inquiries have the power to summon witnesses, or is that power only for the national inquiry? And most critically, we need a clear timeline for conclusions and actions. The victims cannot wait another decade for justice. We should be able to do this in 2 years. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we didn't need to commission a report to tell us what we already knew. So will she apologise on behalf of herself, the Labour Party and the Prime Minister for wasting so much time and voting against this, dismissing the concerns of the survivors? The House, the British public, and most importantly, the many brave survivors deserve clear answers from a government of dithering and delay.
What was the answer you gave for Telford?
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement from the Home Secretary and that there will now be a national inquiry. Does the Home Secretary think that that will be finished within, let's say, 2 years for the British people? And given that she quite rightly apologised to the victims and survivors, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Well, he raises the issue about the timescale for this and the in the discussions that we have had with Baroness Casey, and also recognising the many issues that people want to raise with an inquiry, we had expected that it might take around 3 years. Clearly, if the Commission is able to work faster than that, then people will clearly want answers as swiftly as possible. But final details about the timings will obviously need to be determined. I think we do need to make sure that we are both implementing the recommendations of previous inquiries and also making sure that we are pursuing these further investigations in local areas as swiftly as possible. And I do reiterate in my statement earlier the recognition of the huge harm that has been done to victims and survivors through decades. And I would urge him to look at that section of Louise Casey's report with the 17 pages of failure year after year after year to follow through and to take action. And I do believe that victims and survivors are owed an apology for that failure over very many years.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has been dragged kicking and screaming to deliver a national inquiry, having dismissed the pleas of a nation for one as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. This reluctance is why my honourable friend for Great Yarmouth will continue with his inquiry, and I will be supporting him in this. But can I ask the Home Secretary, will this government's inquiry investigate the political motivations behind the cover-ups, including the role of the Labour Party, or will this continue to be swept under the carpet?
What I say to the honourable member is I think everyone should want not just to get to the truth about past failures, but also to make sure that we make the changes to protect children for the future as well. That includes changes in social services, it includes changes in policing and the police operation that I hope that she would welcome to take action to put perpetrators behind bars, and also the action to gather proper ethnicity data, which simply has not been gathered properly before, and where Louise Casey's report is very clear. It is totally inadequate, the data gathering that her previous government left behind. So I hope she would agree to all of those being extremely important so that we can get stronger protection and truth for victims.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is amazing, it is staggering that the Labour MPs can come here today and welcome an inquiry when they was given the chance. They all voted against one. But these girls, these victims of the Pakistani grooming gangs, they were kidnapped, they were abused, they were drugged, they were raped. And when they reached out for help, everybody ignored them. So there's little wonder they have no faith in the system. But they can regain faith if the Home Secretary agrees with me and appoints Maggie Oliver as chair of the inquiry.
Well, I would say to the honourable member, the child sexual exploitation and abuse, some of the most vile crimes that our country faces. And what Baroness Casey's report sets out in some detail, set out over 17 pages, just report after report after review after report after review, and so many of those recommendations never implemented. So concerns that were raised at the time of the Rotherham inquiry about issues around ethnicity, about issues around lack of information sharing, about lack of protection for children, simply not acted on. And Baroness Casey herself says, if we'd got this right years ago, seeing these girls as children raped rather than wayward teenagers, then I doubt we would be in this place now. He was a member of the previous government that did fail to do this, and I would hope that he would agree that actually successive governments, successive agencies across the country have failed to act on this, and we need to make sure that there is a proper independent inquiry, as well as, most crucially of all, the action by police to take the operations that will bring perpetrators to justice and put them behind bars.
Patricia Ferguson. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for bringing forward this.